Um, so, Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll ask Chris, our special guest, as opposed to our run-of-the-mill guest, Chris, to do the same.
Awesome. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I still see a whole bunch of people signing on here. I am the Chief Operating Officer and Vice President of Information Technology and Analytics at Unifun in Cincinnati, Ohio. Adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati, where I teach data visualization. One of the selected Tableau Zen Masters and author of the Big Book of Dashboards.
Fantastic. And usually it's just Jeff and I doing that. Usually we've done this twice before. This is our third time, but we've invited our special guest, Mr. Chris Love, to join us. So, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name's Chris Love. So I'm a lowly account manager at the Information Lab, the Tableau Zen Master, Ultra X Ace, and I generally work with our customers to make them successful.
And Chris, you are indeed quite modest. Am I not mistaken that you won the Alteryx Grand Prix? I think you won it twice. Is that correct?
I did. That's right. Yeah, 2 years on the trot.
Yeah, that's a formidable accomplishment. For those of you not familiar with that, it's the functional equivalent in the Alteryx world of the Iron Viz competition. Hi, I'm Steve Wexler. I'm the founder and principal and sole employee of Data Revelations. I was Tableau's inaugural Iron Viz champion back when I was using Tableau for the IBM 360. I am also a Tableau Zen Master and one of the three authors of the Big Book of Dashboards. And the whole purpose of these chart chats is to try to rekindle the discussions and the debates that Jeff and I and our fellow author Andy Cotgreave had. We say, two data visualization experts duking it out. If you've listened to these things before, you'll know it's more kind of two guys having an affable chat or intellectual disagreement about things, though that doesn't quite have the same marketing allure as something like this. So this is why we're saying two guys duking it out. And Jeff had suggested, well, we could say, two people fighting over a donut chart as a possibility. In any case, we very much wanted to have Chris Love join us. That has had a big influence on certainly my career, and just in the last few weeks, he just keeps popping up on a variety of discussions. So, Chris, thanks for making the time to join us today.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
So, one thing we've started to do is we'll discuss something in the previous chart chat, and we'll get a lot of comments or arguments or disagreements or tweets about things. And I heard a lot of things from Dan Zvinka and Chris Love about my suggestion that it's okay to use a lollipop chart. And I realized I left something out of that discussion. So what precipitated it was I had a client that had a dashboard like this, and they were experimenting with different things. And I proposed, hey, instead of those experimentations, if you really want to, I think it would be acceptable to have something like this, where you're still keying into position from a common baseline. So here was the before and here was the after. What I hadn't done was shown you what was really the reason for doing this. I wasn't necessarily saying, oh, the thing on the left is boring. You don't want boring. Let's do the thing on the right. I was trying to stop the customer from doing this. Oops, I missed it. There we go. Sorry about that. They wanted to create a dashboard, a demographics dashboard that looked like this, which is visually arresting, but analytically pretty worthless. You're going to spend a couple of minutes trying to figure out what it means and realize, gee, this really isn't all that important. And so my whole argument was, hey, maybe you could win them over, do something which is analytically pretty solid with the lollipop chart. And so I don't think I had set up my case properly, that I was trying to stop them from making a monstrosity and said, hey, maybe the lollipops would do the trick. But in any case, Chris weighed in, as did Daniel Zvinka, and why he didn't recommend them for beginners. Chris, do you want to share your screen, or do you just want to comment on this maybe a little bit?
I think I'll just kind of give a flavor of what I talked about in that article. And what I was really trying to get across was the fact that lollipop charts are something that we often see a lot of bad ones of. So I very rarely see poor bar charts, but it's very easy as a beginner to create a poor lollipop chart, maybe with great big lollipops because you want to put the number in that doesn't necessarily guide the user to picking out the position on the axis as well. So I guess the point that I was coming from was that whenever I'm teaching Tableau to a bunch of beginners or data visualization to a bunch of beginners, if there's not that time to have that conversation about creating a very valuable lollipop chart versus what perhaps isn't as valuable for an audience, then that's something that I won't raise, because I think if you just flash up a lollipop chart and say, this is it, if you go and create it, that's going to be great, then it's very easy to make mistakes. So I think it's just about having room for that conversation. If you do have room for that conversation, then it is a great way of expanding out the options and having a great discussion with a room full of people about what is good visualization and what is perhaps not as good.
Jeff, you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think I do as well show lollipops in Tableau training, specifically to show the function of a dual access. Part of the discussion on Twitter is that discussion was very tool centered, around Tableau, because it requires a dual access, and other tools you might use different techniques. I guess it just, for me, it goes back to and probably leads to the next topic of the bar hopping.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's just it's a variation of a bar chart. And I think with the labels, you don't lose anything with the accuracy of it. And as Chris said, with the proper design, it probably functions pretty much like a bar chart would in some cases.
So, in fact, this kind of acted as a little bit of a catalyst to you doing a blog post and showing different ways of showing position and bar charts and alternatives to bar charts. So, Jeff, I'm going to stop sharing, and why don't you take over?
I will do. Yeah. So bar hopping was one that a viz that I did recently here. Just all variations of different bar charts, and it was kind of on that topic. I often hear bar charts are boring, and that was kind of what the client was saying in your case, Steve. And so I was just kind of challenged with that to say, okay, well, there's other different designs that we can do. I think some of these work better than others for different scenarios. The progress bar, for example, I think the progress bars are something that's known to us throughout everything we do. We see it on our cable box, or Netflix or Prime, Amazon. You pause a TV show, it has a progress bar on it, right, to tell you how far you're into the show. So I think the variations here are interesting. Maybe they don't apply in this case. Maybe the progress bar isn't the right view for central and east and south and west. But if your data is bounded and you have a target, I think a progress bar works really, really well. And I really like the thin progress bars. I like the outline bar chart. I use that a lot in what I do, just because it pulls some of the color away if you don't want to draw the eye. The bar chart filled with color and bright red will draw your eye a whole lot more than in some other instances, or maybe combine them, maybe fill the one that's red and outline the others. And then there were some fun variations where I included the lollipop. I included some other techniques with the line down the middle or the line at the bottom to sort of show progress, and Cleveland's dot plot. The one I think people like the most, at least in the comments that I saw about it, were the unit chart. That's real clear, where you have your access is still there, and you have these grid lines, but the grid lines are sort of baked into separating the bars, and in this case in 10% increments. Makes it really easy to see, sort of in chunks what the data is. So it really kind of does tie to the lollipop chart. I guess the one I would caution, and I probably should add to the viz, a cautionary note is the rounded bars. We've seen some talk on Twitter about that. You'll notice I went with really, really thin bars on those. When you add a roundedness to the end, you have the same problem that a lollipop does, right? It extends your point past where the bar really stops. So that one could probably be problematic as well for accuracy, just like a lollipop chart.
So just, Jeff, if you look at your lollipop chart and you have an open-ended lollipop chart, one of the things both you and Chris pointed out, and I used to be guilty of this, is I would have a very big lollipop, a big piece of candy on the thin stick, and so that I put the number inside it. And I've been convinced by you and others and Alberto Cairo that, probably don't need to have quite as large a lollipop. Just want to comment on your chart in the bottom right-hand corner, the unit chart progress bar. I really like this, and I like that when I asked you, is this how you did it? That it was easy. When I've done something like this, I've tried to do it with pictograms. Like I was trying to do a USA Today type of graphic and showing the number of drinks consumed. And it was martini glasses. And how do you show 7.5 martini glasses? How do you get half of the martini glass there? And it was painful versus, and when I'd asked you about this is just a bar chart. And the way you're breaking it into units is you've just got a white and reasonably thick reference line across this, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I did that on both the unit chart and the unit progress bar because that was just the easiest thing to do. Although if you download the workbook on the unit chart, there is another method for doing it which involves calculations and creating a calculation, and you can do it without those reference lines. But I just thought the reference lines were quick and easy.
All right, and unless either of you have comments, I'm ready to move on to let's play Name the Author, which is something that Jeff introduced last week, not last week, last month. And by the way, if everyone wants to participate in this, you can go to your chat window. So in a moment, I'm going to show you someone who has created a visualization. It turns out they are all from the Tableau universe. I probably should have gone outside of that and maybe shown people some stuff. Hold on one second. Let me share this. And
yes, Chris, you and I should probably click over to the participants window and not look at the chat, I guess. I don't know.
Okay,
so
I'll
people,
do
okay, so we're going to play Name the Author, and Jeff. So I'm going to do one for Jeff, one for Chris, one for Jeff, one for Chris, and then I'm going to let you both try to weigh in on who the final author is. So this is a snippet from a dashboard, and I had just seen this yesterday, and I remember seeing this, and it kind of came into my Twitter feed thinking, wow, this looks so much like Jeff's stuff. But it's not, Jeff, I wouldn't be showing you one of your pieces of dashboard. I don't think you're that adult at this point that you won't remember. Here,
I don't know. Yeah, I certainly don't recognize that one.
Here's the entire thing. And can you guess who the author is? But part of it was that it was clean, it was straightforward, it was purposeful use of color. Once in a while, I might see you use a donut chart. It's kind of rare. But I just remember seeing the snippet of it and thought, man, this kind of reminds me a lot of Jeff Shaffer. And Kevin Flaridge is in the chat window, and he says he knows who it is. But Jeff, let me give you a chance first.
Oh, I thought we were giving the chat participants, or are the people in the
I'm
chat
only
window?
seeing one person in the chat
nobody's
window.
guessing?
Yeah,
Okay.
no one's guessing. Kevin, do you want to give it up and type in who it is? Jeff's being a good egg. He's not looking. So if you want to tell us who you think it is, that would be great. And Kevin has in fact gotten it. Do you want me to do the big reveal now, Jeff, or do you want to give it a try?
I don't know who that is. It's health related data, and so I guess that would probably I would have guessed it would have been the data set from Lindsay's health data viz project, but no, I don't know who that is.
And this comes from Sean Miller, also known as Hipster Viz Ninja.
Okay.
Look, Sean, I'm just going to say high praise. If hey, this reminds me of Jeff's work. You could do a lot worse in that respect. Okay, Chris, you're, and everybody else is up. You're up, and Jeff and I show this in our workshop. And you'll see the designer in the bottom right. I have purposely, left it out. Do you know who this is?
I don't.
Okay. And well, and anyone else in the chat window, you're welcome to weigh in.
Sounds like Kevin's 1 for 1, right?
Yeah, Kevin is 1 for 1 right now. So Kevin, you're back. You could quit now and just end up undefeated. This is one of the more creative uses of tile maps that I've seen, because it's showing changes over time. I had no idea the Blue Ridge Mountains got way more visitors than Fort Sumter in South Carolina, which I just visited last week. And so Kevin or anybody else in the chat window, you're welcome to weigh in. And also this particular author who does great work, and his work is in the Big Book of Dashboards. He used this technique a lot. Did something with showing elections over time, how each state voted Republican or Democrat. Jeff, do you want to give us the reveal of who the author is? Do you remember?
I thought, is this Matt?
It is Matt Chambers.
Yeah.
Or Sir Visalot. Indeed. Well done. Okay, so Jeff, let's go back to you. And this is the top 50 NBA scoring leaders by points per game. And it's a little hard to see what's going on here, so let me just show a segment of it. And it's like no player has the exact same profile of anybody else. It's showing how many points were they scored 0 through 5 points, how many games did they score 5 through 10, etc. And so these are the top 50 point getters of all time, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being the top. And this just surprised me when I just saw John Stockton.
Oh wow! Yeah.
That great use of small multiples, and we're going to see something like this when we're discussing population pyramids and the like. But so either of you want to weigh in as to you think who created this really interesting analysis, showing that the profiles are wildly different, even though these people are all monster point producers?
No, this tile reminds me of the old Russell Spangler's health index viz with all the small multiple bar charts. I guess this one is probably related to Sports Viz Sunday Initiative would be my guess. I didn't see what their data was or what. I don't remember seeing this viz. So yeah, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
And well, this would be from Roddy Zakovich.
Roddy.
Yep. And a lot of versatile stuff in his he's certainly created ridiculously amazing curvy stuff, but also he usually delivers, I think, consistently what's the best way to relate the data so people can understand it. I was going to show you his Queen Viz, which is beautiful, and it's either the animated version or the interactive version. I think it's just terrific. This is the last one. Sorry, I didn't quite give a fair. Hey Matt, hey hey Jeff, hey Chris, what do you think? But I've seen a lot of this guy's work, and I just gave it away. I said guy. Doing this type of thing where, hey, let you focus on a state or a couple of states, so you can, hey, I want to look at places that are meaningful to me. It's interesting that I said John Stockton. We've got Utah over here highlighted. In any case, do either of you want to wager a guess, or just guess, you don't have to wager at all, as to who produced this interactive thing where you could see how household income has just distribution of household income in different buckets over time. And there's 50 states here, but it will highlight 2 states, any 2 states that you want.
I think it's a good job we're not wagering, because I'm not doing very well. I don't know this one either.
I was like, oh, I wanted to phone a friend there with Chris. I thought Chris might be there.
Hey, so anybody in? Do you want me to give you a hint?
Are we getting anybody in the chat window?
I'm not getting anybody in the chat window weighing in on this one, but this particular
we need help. We need help. You picked some good ones.
This particular
we're
author,
we're gonna take it up a notch on you next time. We'll just remember that.
Oh, I was tempted to bring in a whole bunch of MicroStrategy dashboards and go, who did this one?
I love the color of this. I love the color, and I was staring at the way the person put it in the titles. I like that.
The other version that this person did, I'm going to give you 2 hints. One is he did something which was it was showing home prices over a period of time, like over a 40-year period. And you could put in when you bought your home, how much you paid for it, and what state you bought it in. So it would show all these, kind of curves of the waxing and waning of home prices, 50 different lines, but it would highlight a line about your state and would feature, had you bought your home in 1999 for $500,000, it would have gone down in value and then up in value, and this is what it would be worth now. And this, instead of just bludgeoning somebody with 50 states worth of data, it's here's the stuff, and I'm going to allow you to make it about your state, your home price, your type of thing, etc. So that's one hint. The other hint is, if he had his druthers, he probably would have used dark backgrounds on all these things.
Dark backgrounds. You're pulling up the plural site crew.
Okay. Okay, we kind of narrowed it down.
Well,
all right. Yes, Kevin Flairledge has got it in the chat window. Man, this guy, I think he only guessed and it is Curtis Harris. So, we will give it up for Curtis, and no, I'm sorry, neither of you win the Tesla this month. So, Tesla and an additional $15,000 get added to the pot for the next time around. Okay, here's something else that we've done a few times, which is, things that we've come across that absolutely delighted us. I'm going to stop sharing, and Jeff, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right, I will start. First one that I saw that I really enjoyed was Bo McCready. This viz, I just love the way this viz is designed. So many different elements here. Early on, when I saw this, I shot him a note and said, "Hey, I'd really like to see the access normalized, because they're all on different scales, and just a consistent access range, so I could kind of see how many of the films." And so we added a button on the top of it that does that. It flips with the dashboard action to a different viz. So this is. Which one here? This is standardized, and then this is the varying accent, and then this is the standardized accent. So he gave 2 different views on there. I also like the way he did the titles. They're kind of all over the place, and they're colored in different ways to match. But I think the area charts the small multiple area charts really work well for this. I've seen so many tweets on this. There was a guy yesterday, a documentary filmmaker, I think, who tweeted just the documentary piece, and it's gotten about 200,000 views on Tableau Public. So I really enjoyed that one. I didn't know if you guys wanted to comment on that.
Same thing about normalizing the axes, that it was so I can just a great widget to have in this. And I thought it was entertaining and interesting and really clear viz. So I'm with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this was another one. This was shown at our recent Cincinnati Tableau user group, and we had special guests Alan, Walker, and Anya, and they did a talk that they did at the Tableau conference, which is, I think it's available online. The TC events, the TC18 talks are all out there. So I'd encourage everybody to go check that out. It's called Why the Where Matters. And what they did is they included some of our own data, and they took the Cincinnati heroin incident data and brought it into Tableau using the same techniques that they were talking about in their talk, and plotted this. Now, this is all of the incidents, the heroin overdoses in Cincinnati. And what they did here is show where the nearest healthcare facility is, and then calculated on zones outside of that healthcare facility the drive time, a mile drive time or a 2-mile drive time. How far away are they? So that I thought was a really interesting viz. A lot of this stuff, I guess the other thing to note is all their slides say, illustrative only, not for production. So these are all kind of concepts. But I really like this because it's real data, right? It just shows the impact of, the heroin overdose situation kind of going on, and where it relates geographically to the local health facilities. Okay, I'll just keep going. This one is Curtis Harris, who I guess did the slope graph chart there. I really like this one. We liked it so much here at our company. We added this to our HR dashboard. And I think there's a couple advantages to this over this is a difficult thing to kind of show churn. We have a version in our dashboard on churn, but I guess what struck me at this is we have about 100 employees in our company. It remains pretty static, plus 1 or 2 every once in a while, going up or down. So this viz by Curtis, I thought, well, gosh, this is a great way to show that, because you don't have to start your access at 0. You can kind of see the magnitude of any period where you hire a lot of employees, or employees quit, or whatever, lost. And so this is really kind of a variation of churn in a kind of a different way over different periods of time, and different amounts in those periods of time. So really like that one.
And if we were writing the book now, the book being the big book of dashboards, we have a chapter on subscriber churn, and I did the dashboard in it, and I would definitely add this as another take on it. Different use case, different type of situation showing, but I think this is really clear and well done, and I would want to add it to that chapter. So maybe if there's ever a second volume or a second edition or additional materials, we could go ahead and do so. We ready to shift back to what delighted on my end?
I think
Or do you have more stuff to delight?
I was kind of stuck over here in my, I did have one more to delight. It just was stuck. Can you see my?
Yep, go ahead.
My presentation mode is not working here, so I'll have to
bring down the power grid for all of Cincinnati and restart. So do you want to show that one, Jeff, or shall I go to, should I do some delights on my end?
Maybe I'll just show it outside of presentation mode, I guess, just because I'd like to share it here. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
It's pulling strings, Ludwig's pulling string viz. This is a really, really well done visualization. Are you seeing it, Steve? You can
yes.
see it? Okay.
Yep.
It's really technical. It's deep. The legend is about the size of a full visualization. It's a really, really tall viz. So you kind of have to really dive deep into this one. But I really love the detail of it. You really get lost in this visualization. It's one that you spend, a good bit of time on. This isn't something at a glance, but the way he used color and size, and the way these strings across the countries here, the way that he has it's the showing each country and the degree of happiness by these categories, and so really beautifully done. Just love the detail of this viz. I just thought I'd show. I'm sorry it's not zoomed in here so you can see the level of detail that went into this, but I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one too. I think it's one that you really need to lean in and take part in. You need to dive in and understand what it's reading. But I don't think that's a bad thing. It really draws you in and wants you want to understand it, because it is so visually appealing and so much effort has gone into the explainers to make it nice and clear.
Yeah, for me, I never see myself making something like this, and it's not because I don't think it's valuable. It's because I just don't have the talent. I would put this up in the Georgia Loopy Nobel laureate dashboard, or the one that's been cited, for eons now, the Charles Menard, Napoleon's doomed attempt to conquer Moscow type of thing. It is not a quick glance, quick read. It's one, as you used the perfect description, Chris, of saying a lean in type of thing. So, and definitely something that delighted. So let me share my screen and discuss a couple of things that delighted. I had the good fortune of doing a workshop, building world-class business dashboards workshop at Disney last week. And when I arrived in the room, there were these all over the all over the walls, and it just cracked me up, and I just felt so welcome. It's like, oh, okay, this theme ride that had hitchhiking ghosts, no, we're going to improve it. We're going to have screaming cats. So if Lulu and Matt and Jason and others are listening at the moment, thank you for that welcome. It made me feel very at home to have that stressed out cat festooning the room. The other thing that delighted on a variety of levels, and it's one of the reasons that I'm happy that Chris is here, is the community having a fantastic discussion, and we're going to continue the discussion today around population pyramids versus connected dot plots versus maybe there are different ways of doing this. So picking up from last week, I had seen this visualization that's on the left over here. Sorry. And when I saw this, it was an excellent report in the World Economic Forum. I thought, this is not a great way to show this data. And I called it a population pyramid, when it's technically a population pyramid is going to be showing gender and is going to be showing age. So the visualization on the right, based on the way Pew Research would handle something like this is what I offered. I said, I think the thing on the right is better than the thing on the left, and here's why I think it's better. And I was really delighted because I like those little guidelines that are there, the little dotted lines, and I could not think of an easy way to do this. And Chris Love piped in and said, oh, it's very simple. Just put attribute of 0 or max of 0 on the other axes, the axes where you're not comparing the values, and don't show the axes. And I got these lovely guidelines and was really happy about that. In any case, a lot of people weighed in on my blog post and tweet and said, hey, that's not technically a population pyramid, and population pyramids can be really valuable if you do this in small multiples. So there's a classic population pyramid on the left, and then Chris Love offered this population shapes in Europe, showing female and male, and said, look, we can see some really interesting, differences. Like here's Kosovo over here, and look how different that is than something like Bulgaria or Croatia. And a lot of people started weighing in on this. And we had Dorian, and Dorian last name starts with a B, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it because I will just mangle his name. Said, hey, let's have both. Let's make it so that here's the population pyramid, which I have over here, and then we can drill down and get the gap. Make it really easy to see the difference between men and women. And then Daniel Zvinka said, hey, why not do something like this? He turned it on its side. The idea is to have the males and females both on the same side so that you can do the comparison and see where one is greater and one is less, and asked, hey, here's what I have in mind. Is it possible to do this? Can you do small multiples? So Daniel asked this, Dorian pipes in and says, yes, it's possible. And I said, yep, it can be done and I can do it. I just can't do it quickly. I'd have to look up different techniques of doing small multiples. I kind of have the Playfair showing the gap chart underneath my fingers. And fortunately, Chris Love, had already participated and was in on the debate. And there were a variety of other discussions that we're having here. So we managed to get Jorge Camoes involved as well. And he's weighing in. And there was a whole discussion about, the way demographers are used to looking at things would be with the going vertically as opposed to horizontally, showing the youngest people at the top to the oldest people, or the oldest people at the top going down to the youngest people, and that's the way they're used to looking at this. Where I am missing. Well, I'm missing the wonderful. Chris to the rescue. Hold on a sec. I'm just going to bring it up over here. Oh, so here is some attempts to put everything on one side by Chris Love. And then here ultimately, and I'll try to zoom this in a little bit. And I just love this because I can easily compare the shapes, something like Kosovo versus Latvia versus Liechtenstein, and I can see where there are really big gaps between men and women. And this is a matter of like 3 or 4 hours that this discussion went on. You had a bunch of people piping in. Well, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I really love this visualization. To me, it nails it. I can compare the shapes really easily. I still might want to have those details. Hey, click on Romania and see the gap chart. And I can compare those shapes. Look at Ireland versus Kosovo versus Montenegro. So I thought we were all said and done. And Jeff, I know you have some things that you want to share about this, some thoughts on this as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. And in any case, Chris, you were absolutely one of my heroes that week. I was just watching that come to life so quickly was absolutely incredible. So between showing how to get the little guide line using an attribute of 0 or max or min of 0, and then doing the small multiples using the gap chart, it was I owe you several beers for sure.
And I think those discussions are really valuable. Yeah, just to get everyone pitching in is something that it was a community effort.
So I guess the only thing I would add is I really like the way that Chris visualizes that. And I think over time, it's a great visualization of the men versus the women. I guess what doesn't pop out to me is if I'm trying to make a comparison of a generation. So I think what that discussion and what transpired, I think the barbell chart does a better job of showing the men versus the women. I certainly think the line chart that Chris did and came out of that discussion shows a much better men versus women than trying to compare an orange bar that's going right to a blue bar that's going left. But at the same time, looking at the shape of the population, I think can tell us something. For example, for me, looking at this particular population pyramid here, you have the baby boomers in the middle of the population, sort of this big fat, we call it the pig through the python, right? You have this big generation of people. And then as they age, you can see that big, generation moving up. You can see that right below them is a generation where, it's thinner. And then the baby boomers themselves that are kind of highlighted here have kids, and you sort of see the aftershock, coming back. And then over time, seeing the shift of the population moving from a sort of a pear shape to just almost a triangle. So that, when I'm looking at maybe not male versus female, when I'm trying to maybe make comparisons of the generation, that I guess pops better for me in an image like this, where I can see the different shapes of the generations versus the line chart. And I guess I would add, there are other examples, China here, where you have that sort of pig through the python. You can see the first generation move through, and then, right after them, it goes down. And then right after that, they have kids, and you kind of see that through. So I think that's interesting. I did, we had some discussion that maybe flipping that on to the x-axis and just showing the camel hump, right? The camel hump here, where you're not comparing men versus women anymore. You're just seeing that the humps are there through the generations. And I know, Steve, you did this with your famous viz here of how old you are. The camel hump is just immediately apparent. You can't compare male versus female here. But I think these two methods, the pyramid for me, or this view, show that generational more than the line chart.
I still think you can have both. By the way, this is the greatest degree to which we disagree in doing the book, and this would be an absolute case study in what would happen. One of us offers something, the other person says, "I'm not really seeing that, and I think this is why it would make more sense." So Chris, you were. We've got some side conversations and other attempts. I get that you want to see that population change, and the example that you showed was done so well because you're showing that block of baby boomers and how they're moving, and it really comes out. I I I, I just think that there's probably a way to just put that both on one side instead of having a divergence, so I can't compare the men and the women. I still think there's probably some way to do it. That said, what's really clear to me is I'm seeing something. That Chris did a version of this. He tried to put some bands in it, and just because I see it and it's clear doesn't mean my audience is going to see it to the same degree. And Daniel Zvinka was making the case, hey, I think it makes more sense for the demographics to go from left to right rather than going from bottom up, from the youngest people down to oldest people on top. But who's your audience in this case? If there are demographers that are used to looking at a chart and it's a certain orientation and they're used to these shapes, and maybe they're gotten good at comparing the length of a bar on the left with the compared on the bar on the right. You need to service your audience first and foremost. So we would probably leave all of these versions in the book. Whoever was the dashboard author would say, hey, here's how I presented this, but the co-authors, the discussion would say, I don't quite buy this, or here's where there might be a need for this, etc. And Chris, do you have any thoughts on this? Because you're the one who kind of did the heavy lifting on, let me try this, that, and the other.
I think from my point of view, I think that this is a very established chart, the population pyramid, and it's something that a lot of people are going to identify with and recognize. Picking out those shapes is really useful. I think what it goes to show is perhaps that each chart, you're not going to fix a chart and suddenly get a solution that is better. There is no better chart. It's horses for courses, depending on what you need to show.
Yeah, just to show that, just between yesterday when we started discussing this and today, here's some of the the stuff that was going on, and trying to show a population that's moving, and Chris's attempt to do it with the gap chart that I prefer. And I'll confess, the orange stuff is really popping out. So it may you need more work on the one on the bottom, or it may be that top chart does a better job telling the story. So, well, in any case, that was I just love the way the community had this open discussion. A lot of very creative and thoughtful people contributing, and then Chris in particular kind of taking up the challenge and building this stuff. So quite grateful about that. We ready to move? Either of you have any comments, or Jeff or Chris?
No, you can.
Let's go to. I'm going to set the table for this, and I think the two of you will do a great job with this. So this is one of the sections that we have when we give a workshop on building world-class business dashboards. Our workshop that's based on the book, The Big Book of Dashboards. And we have a section about critical thinking in data analysis. And Jeff has some wonderful ways of setting this up, which is, man, the data is going to be messy. Just realize that there's probably going to be all sorts of flaws in it. And, you're talking your roommate in college messy, and
you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry about
Steve,
that.
Trying to show slides, just FYI.
Oh, too bad, because then we missed seeing Chris's incredible. So I was not sharing the screen when I was showing. Oh, hold on. I insist on this because it's it is just too good not to show Chris's work. Give me a sec. There we go. That's the thing that I thought I was sharing.
Okay.
And there's Jeff's look. I'm seeing the the population moving over time, and then Chris trying to do the same thing with a common baseline and showing the men versus the women. And I will admit that the orange is popping quite a bit. My apologies. Thanks for not letting me go too long with not sharing the screen. In any case, this notion that you can count on the data you've been given being clean, pristine, normalized, proper, vetted, big mistake. The data you're going to get is your college roommate messy. You may think that you have this wonderful Westminster Kennel Club worthy when actually your data looks more like this. And one of the things that Jeff and I did a dual blog post about, and one of the things that we cite in the workshop is one particular incident that happened with Makeover Monday. Let the record show, I think Makeover Monday is great. I help run a tug. We've done 2 or 3 sessions around Makeover Monday. For those of you who are not familiar with it, there will be a visualization that's out in the wild. There'll be the data set that supports it. And then the 2 current curators of this, and one was the creator of it, Andy Kriebel, and now Eva Murray, will say, hey, world, is this the best way to present this data? Or can you come up with a better way? Or is there a story in this data that may be missing? And for the most part, great stuff is coming out of this. Every once in a while, though, there's a data set that has some pretty serious flaws in it. And one of them happened in this case where there was an article reported, I think this periodical in Australia, and I think Forbes Australia said the 50 highest paying jobs are paying men significantly more. And there were a lot of flaws with the data sets and the assumptions. And the concern that I had and Jeff and others had was that, gee, inadvertently, everyone that was doing Makeover Monday that particular week was amplifying something that wasn't true. So part of what we really want to stress is that, don't assume somebody else is taking care of making sure the data is okay. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hand things over to both Jeff and Chris, and I think Chris in particular. I know, and this is the other reason we invited you, is that I know that you blogged about, and we've had a lot of conversations about thinking and about the data. So,
yeah, so I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was, once you've got that clean data and you're happy with it, I think sometimes there's a need to tell a story about data, particularly when we're not necessarily familiar with it, to add an editorial layer to our data viz. This is something we often see in the news. We'll all be familiar with those stories about shock horror, 50% of students are below average. So this headline is another take on it. 10% of Somerset secondary schools are well below average. This is trying to add news to data that isn't necessarily something that is that newsworthy. And this is something that people struggle with. I think Jonathan Allenby, who is a colleague of mine at our data school, he said here, he's seen these spikes in energy usage when he was looking at the 10 Downing Street data as part of Makeover Monday. And he saw these big spikes, but he couldn't explain them. He couldn't find the causes. And the honest answer is they might not be a cause. What data visualization allows us to do is see those things pop out, but it also lends us to try and explain them. So I've got a couple of examples. So here we've got some surgeons who are doing surgery, and we can see the complications that result as a result of those surgeries. This is quite a complex piece of surgery, and we're comparing how good these surgeons are, I guess, by looking at the number of complications. And what we see is that surgeon A is perhaps not the best. And hopefully, audience, you're all screaming out the obvious question that we need to ask here. How many of these surgeries does each surgeon do? Because that's certainly going to have an impact on how many complications we see. So we can visualize the rate of complications, i.e. how many complications per surgery. And the data changes. So we can see that, yes, surgeon A has got kind of just over 11.5% rate versus surgeon C, who's down well below 10%. So there's still a big difference in the amount of complications. Perhaps we'll add an annotation to this to say that surgeon C is a little bit more experienced. He's got a bit more going on, and so he should teach perhaps to the other surgeons.
I'm sorry, man. I don't know about Jeff. I don't want to go to any of these people. So,
we'll come back to that in a minute, because
okay.
I think another example, this factory data. So the number of failures in this bike data. This is a factory making bicycles, and we can see that the number of failures they get returned. They're making perhaps between 3 and 10 bikes a day, and we can see that the number of failures they get returned in October was significantly higher. We could try and explain this, and the truth of the matter is, on both of these are random data sets. These are things that I have created. I used UltraX to do it, and just fed some random data in using the 10% rate and some random numbers to generate this data, to generate a random data set that we can then ascribe stories to. And this is very easy to do if we don't have that full picture. So this was just made by generating 3 to 10 incidents every day and marking a certain percentage of them as a low amount. So we have to be careful when we're looking at data we don't understand and attributing stories to it. A couple of real life examples. So this is an example from this is the design jerk. Posted on Twitter around London buses, saying London buses are more dangerous for women. I guess the question I have of seeing this is the overall number of accidents involving different genders. What I don't know is how many females ride on buses versus the number of males. So are there more women out during the day on buses? Are there more men? I don't know that answer, so I can't answer this and say whether this is a valid assumption of that they're more dangerous. Likewise, this is Eva Murray hasn't fallen into this trap. She's shared data on London bus accidents in a similar vein, highlighting the number of peaks, but she doesn't try and draw out a story. She just highlights the fact that these peaks are there, which I think is perhaps the right way of doing things. So I guess the takeaway message for me is that we need to be careful about attributing stories to data we don't understand.
Yeah, Chris, if you could go back to the doctors, the surgeons, maybe your first slide. What's I see this a lot, especially with my students at UC. They'll plot crime in the United States, and lo and behold, California has the most crime, or Cincinnati. They'll plot Cincinnati, and Westwood and Cincinnati has the most crime, and they'll say it's the most dangerous. Without putting that in context, no, Westwood and Cincinnati has the most people, just like California has the most people. So moving it to your second slide, looking at it by rate, sort of normalizing this together, and just like in the London bus, you don't have the denominator of what you're really dividing by to get to that answer. But in something like this, you'll see the data really shifts, and I realize it's kind of dummy data, but in that point, you also have to think about what is your natural variation, right? In statistical process control, they talk about common cause variation and special cause variation. There's common variation that doesn't necessarily have an underlying reason for it. It's just the natural variation of the data. Even if anybody studied Six Sigma, they talk about how strict Six Sigma to be 99.99 whatever percent, and when you calculate all that and you learn more about it, there's 1.5% standard deviation variance in there. And so I think these are important points. Like, you have your natural variation of your data, you have the idea of you might be creating stories where there is no story, and I think you're hitting on some really great stuff here, Chris.
Well, another question I have for both of you is, well, when we see something that alarms us, what should we do? And not just the three of us, but the community in general. So, the example where the Australian pay gap, which was, and if you follow the whole blog post there, Jeff really did some serious research on this and found a study that was done of ophthalmologists in Australia, and found that the actual gap was far less than what was reported from that data set. Or there was a data set a little while ago about how many hours a month you have to work to be able to afford a house in New York. And there were just some flaws with the concept that was behind this. What does one do? Do we tweet about it, say something about it? Do we encourage people not to not keep publishing the visualizations because they've quote unquote proven they're not right? What should we be doing in a respectful way?
I mean, I'll jump in first and say, I like that I see people putting Makeover Monday on the Viz, knowing it's a Makeover Monday exercise. Draw to Alan Walker. He puts right on the bottom of that Cincinnati Viz, for illustrative purposes only, right? Not for production. It's meant to be a concept, really, of what you could do with the data, rather than drawing conclusions that you should go make decisions on. I think those are, two different things. And then I think having discussions like this, we have a whole group in the community, if we can do it in a positive way, having discussions about the data sets, there's enough people looking at the data that will each spot something different, right?
Absolutely. And Ben Jones had a great blog post recently just sharing how we can give feedback in the community, and he talked about reaching out privately first and talking to people. So I think that's a really important thing to do, and just people really respect and are more welcoming of feedback when you give it privately, and first of all ask for their permission to give feedback. If they're making a fundamental error, pointing it out, I think is very good. I think these discussions are always valid. There's always new people entering the community. There's a reason we're always talking about pie charts. There's a reason we're always talking about color blindness, and that's because we have new people coming into the community all the time who are likely to make mistakes that we've all made before. We've all been there. So the more we expose these conversations and make them relevant to new users, the better.
You've actually go ahead.
We didn't ask Chris to ask this, but he set us up for our next episode. So
I was thinking exactly the same thing. Do you want to set it up, Jeff?
Oh, go ahead.
So this whole discussion of critiquing, and is it okay to critique somebody who has published something, and how do you do it? And I know Jeff and I have some think strongly about this, and so our next chart chat is going to be on March 21st, same time, and lo and behold, Andy Cotgreave is going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about critiquing and when is it appropriate, and do you have to get permission from somebody to critique them publicly, or are they a public figure? and who is purporting to be an expert, and it's, you put yourself out there, you're going to get some criticism. So I don't know the answer yet. Hold on one sec. I'm very much looking forward to discussing it. So Chris, you could not have done a better job setting us up. Also, resources, workshops, upcoming classes, all that type of stuff, including chart chat, including recordings of the current and previous chart chat. You can find all these things at bigbookofdashboards.com. So do visit there, do subscribe to the newsletter that's there, and do check out to see if there are any both free and some paid events coming up that you will find worthwhile. Chris, thank you very much for the work that you did the last couple of weeks and for joining us today. Jeff, as always, I am now rethinking, maybe he's got a point about this population pyramid stuff. Look, we're both professional chart looker-atters, as is Chris. And gee, if he's not seeing it exactly the same way I'm seeing it, my audience may not be seeing it exactly the same way I'm seeing it. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much. Looking forward to our next round on March 21st. And thank you.
Thank you all.